you brought up school, and Faith, I'll go back to you. Knowing that you had a passion for mechanical things, how did you settle on deciding to pursue aviation mechanically, and then two, how did you pick a school that kind of sent you in that direction from there?
So actually, those are kind of tied together because when I was looking at things to do, I contemplated becoming a heavy diesel mechanic. I contemplated, working on boats, working on trains, anything that was going to be niche. Because my goal wasn't to work at a mom and pop shop working on cars. And so I started to explore and see what was going to be the best route to go. So I actually contemplated going into the military because I didn't realize that there was schooling and educational opportunities to go into those kinds of things. So I actually went to my guidance counselor. We used to meet every so often, and they would do check-ins like your senior year, like, "Hey, how's it going? What's your plan?" Well, all the way up until like it must have been, I mean, weeks before graduation. I was just like, "I'm taken care of. I'm going in the military. Like, I'm going in the Air Force. Don't worry about me." She's like, "Okay, you're one of my easy ones. All right, cool." And then right before we're about to graduate, I was like, you know, are there schools for this kind of stuff or no? Because I'm figuring out how long I'm gonna have to be in, or like what I'm gonna have to do to get to those positions in the military. And she's like, well, she's like, let's take a look. So I was like, how about aircraft aviation and I'm sorry, maintenance. And she's like, yeah. She's like, there's a thing for that. So she opens this great big book and starts flipping through, and she's like, Carbondale. And so I'm like, I'll call them and see. And, I don't know if I'm going to get accepted. And there's a lot of other stuff that plays into the fact there, and tuition. And so I was like, I'm paying for this on my own. I don't know how I'm going to make this work, but we'll call them. We'll just see. So I scheduled a tour and walked around, and their hangar is full at SIU Carbondale. They have a plethora of planes and just odd aircraft and their really unique stuff. And the person that was giving me a tour was actually a student. So the university did a fantastic job of setting up tours for students, and they always made sure that there was a student giving the tour so they could give you, their own input on the school, what they thought, things to look out for, cool things that they're into. And so the guy that was giving me the tour said, "Are you interested at all in aviation helicopter maintenance?" And I said, that would be really cool. So I didn't even know at the time. And he's like, well, hey, I'll go get the helicopter hangar key real quick. Like, I'll be right back. He said, actually, you know what? The professor that runs that program might even be over there. So we walked down the street and we checked out the helicopter hangar. And unbeknownst to me, the only female professor in the whole program was the helicopter professor.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
by the time I made it over there, she was like, "Hey, what's going on?" She knew the student that was showing me around, and he's like, "Oh, I'm giving a tour." And so she very quickly was like, "Okay, if you're interested, we need to have a sit down talk. Come in my office." And so she played a lot into me going through that school, going through the program, picking helicopters as my specialization. But yeah, she was awesome. So she used to work for a HIMS company as well back in the day. And so she knew quite a bit, as did the other instructors too. They actually used to work for Bell.
Okay.
So, so yeah, it was awesome getting to learn from her. And then that kind of sealed the deal. And I was like, okay, how are we going to fund this? How am I going to do this? And so, uh, one thing led to another, and I ended up going to SIU. So,
You brought up SIU a couple times. If I remember right, it's Southern Illinois University. Is that right?
yep, Southern Illinois University, but it's the Carbondale campus. There's also in Edwardsville, but Carbondale.
Okay. Can you talk about that program a little bit? Because I feel like there's a lot of these programs that are really awesome, and it sounds like this is one of them that people just aren't familiar with because of whatever it might be regionally. It might be, who knows what the reason is. But can you talk about that program a little bit and what you liked about it?
Yeah, that place is a hidden gem. I'm lucky and was happenstance. I mean, I was a driven kid, don't get me wrong, and I worked hard to get where I am, but there was also a lot of people pointing me in the right direction that led to where I ended up, which was awesome. But Carbondale has a couple different programs. So there is a management program, like a flight management program, and then there is the maintenance program. So the maintenance program is a bachelor's degree. Um, your first 3 years of classes are towards your A&P. So, you're taking props, you're taking aerodynamics, hydraulics, you're taking the basics, and they actually go into pretty good depth into these chapters. And so your senior year, however, you get to choose a specialization. So the class that you've been brought up with for the last 3 years kind of splits ways, whatever they choose. So they had avionics, which is where I would say 2/3 of the class ended up going. That was a pretty popular specialization. We also had advanced maintenance. So those guys did a lot of composite work, and they also got a minor in airport management. And then last but not least was helicopter maintenance, and they had an entire separate hangar and facility. So after doing more research and learning that helicopter maintenance program was there, I learned that there's only, I think, less than 5 schools that have actually a helicopter maintenance program within the United States. So that was huge. And so I think my class ended up having about 12 students total. When it was all said and done, out of the initial like 50 or so that we'd had. So and I think from that group, I want to say only 3 of us went on to actually wrench on helicopters. A couple of the other guys went on to fly, and then a good friend of mine, she actually flies in the Navy. She flies a Sea Ranger. So pretty cool. So
Yeah.
pretty small class, but I really enjoyed it. I got to know my classmates that much better, and we got to really do some big projects. We did transmission overhauls, head overhauls, anything and everything, really. It was really great hands-on experience, and it set me up pretty when I got out of school, because there's not many A&Ps that have actually touched a helicopter or understand the nomenclature of a helicopter. So that was a huge bonus. So I always try to implore to people, if you really are dead set on going into, helicopter maintenance, you should definitely check out SIUC.
I remember hearing you talk about this on a separate podcast, but the fact, I think it was the lady you'd mentioned, the head of the program. She talked about coming out with the Bell certificate. So you actually left the program with a certificate that you could use in the field. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the school had 3 Bell 47s. They had 2 206s. They had a Huey, a 205, and then I think it was a shell of a 214, which we really didn't do too much with. However, the school back in the day used to have a Bell 47 maintenance accreditation as well as the 205. So a couple of the professors were saying that the curriculum needed to be rewritten because it had been handed off. And so the class before me, I think they hadn't gotten the certificate because the curriculum hadn't been rewritten yet. And once I found out that all they had to do was rewrite some of the PowerPoints, I was on it. I was like, I'll rewrite it. Like, I'll do whatever we have to do to get that cert, because when you leave, that's huge. Like, if you want to go work for fires, if you want to get your forestry card and work and do anything like that, you have to have some type of an airframe cert from a manufacturer. And so I'm like, that's like job placement, like huge. So
Yeah.
her name was Karen, the professor that was wheeling and dealing over there with me. And I told her, I'm like, hey, like, what can we do to make this happen? And she's like, I'll look into it. And God bless her, I was on her like stink on shit. That's why she had it done. So we all got it that year, and I think everyone after her has too. She's kept up with it, and she's awesome. She always does an amazing job. She has so many different, classes that she teaches, and she tries to give 100% to, not just the helicopter program. So, but yeah, so I actually left with a Bell 205 A1 field maintenance cert. So I haven't touched one since, but that was also a huge plus because I actually had something that said, yes, I know how to look through the Bell tech pubs. I understand, like, torque checks, like I'm familiar with Bell products. So that was a huge plus.